Hi, I'm Liz Nedden. I've just got a little video here that'll talk you through some of the ideas that I've picked up going through and developing the new achievement standards for level 1. So a little note for you, these are definitely just my own views, and I strongly recommend that you look at the NCA website for the most up-to-date info there. So a little bit just about me. I grew up in Auckland, in South Auckland in Mangere East, and I went to a number of schools in South Auckland and ended up at the University of Auckland. And I later on went to worked at the university in the statistics department, and then on at Manukau Institute of Technology. And then I took time off, had my kids, and then I retrained as a secondary teacher and have worked at a number of schools since then. So this is my beautiful family, my twin girls, when they were little, and now they're teenagers, so get a bit more grown up, and my lovely husband, and that's us up at a beach up in Northland, where some of our family is. So here's a reminder about the new Level 1 standards, and this is the most recent timeline of when things are being issued. So at the moment we've drafted and gone through feedback and redrafted those standards, made some assessment tasks, and we're now asking for more feedback, and then they'll become finalised later this year when the ministry is ready for those. Then next year, some schools are going to volunteer to do pilots, and we'll revise and improve things. And then in 2023, that's when our previous standards will expire, and all of the students will then need to start the new standards. So I want to start with just looking, first of all, at the curriculum. In maths and stats, what does it mean for us? What is the differences between what we've done and what we're currently doing and what we need to do in the future? So this diagram, I'm just trying to show you what we're trying to do. One of the big ideas is that we're trying to reconnect all of these topics together, because maths, as we know, doesn't exist in isolation. Number isn't separate from measurement, for example, and number flows into algebra and graphs, and they all connected together. And so that's one of the big issues behind it that we've been trying to move towards. So we know that NCA is, the ministry's defined it as a foundational level qualification, and then level 2 and 3 are where we specialise. So one of those is reconnecting the learning, as I said. We've still got flexibility for every school to design their own course, but hopefully we'll see in the future years, when things have settled down, hopefully we'll see that the kaiaka workload, that it will reduce. We're only going to have 2 internal assessments to write and mark during the year, as opposed to some of the courses that I teach where I might, like for example, at the moment I teach 5 internal standards a year. That's quite a lot of marking and writing assessments and moderation meetings and so on. So hopefully this is going to reduce once we learn and understand the new standards and get our head around it. Konga workload and wellbeing, they'll only have 2 internals, 2 externals that the school's going to choose from to put in a course, and so their workload is going to be a lot lower in terms of the stress of managing exams and assessments than it has been. So hopefully there's more focus on the teaching and learning. We've added that Takaranga Maori focus, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But please know I am absolutely no expert. All I can do is share a few thoughts and reflections of things that I've picked up. So as I said, more teaching and learning time, and also having numeracy separate now. I'm hoping that's going to take pressure off me as a teacher to feel that I've got to get these kids through to 10 credits and their achievement standards. Oh, yikes. And so by having that removed as a separate thing, it means that I can look at each standard the students are sitting, and assess, have they actually got the content knowledge and understanding that we want to have them to have of the standard. So hopefully that will remove some pressure. So this is what we've got at the moment, is we've got a multitude of different standards, all in their silos, and it covers 44 credits altogether, and it's at curriculum levels 5 and 6. So what we're moving to is just having 4 standards with a key focus now looking at our stats investigations, mathematical problem solving, literacy, and reasoning. And so this is only going to be at curriculum level 6, and we're going to get 20 credits from these 4 groups of standards now. So it means that students are going to be looking at the curriculum more holistically, connecting all these strands together again, rather than maybe some students might only do measurement, numeric reasoning, linear algebra, and bivariate. So they've got not even a quarter of our curriculum that they have learned and understood, and that limits them from pathways in the future. So what we're going to do hopefully is make it more broad so that students are much better prepared for when they specialise in year 12 and 13, but also we'll be keeping those pathways open for longer because they have a much more holistic, well-rounded understanding of maths and stats in all areas, not just in one or two. So there is the learning matrix, and this is what we've done is we've gone through the curriculum and the group of us plus the people from the ministry and tried to extract what we think is the most significant learning, what are the most important things that we need to teach and the students need to learn. So I just want to have a look at this in a bit more detail by comparing the level 5 and the level 6 of the curriculum. So at the moment, this is what's under number. And so you'll notice it includes, your prime numbers, factors and multiples, particularly operations with fractions, decimals, percentages, and so on, and rounding and decimal place value. Whereas what we're moving to now, we're only going to be doing level 6. And so you'll see some of that has gone. So we're not going to be assessing, for example, fraction of, decimal of, percentage of, a lot of the things that we have done in the numeric reasoning course. And remember, the kids are going to be getting their numeracy from elsewhere, from their other unit standards. So now this is looking at mathematics. What do we actually need them to know at this level? Similarly, if I look at the algebra, so level 5 versus the progression to level 6, we've got our extra exponentials that have been added in there, simultaneous equations have come up, and we've gone dealing with exponents, and moving on to those graphs, particularly with the exponentials and things and rates of change. Understanding that idea is quite a big one for level 6. Then if we have a look at geometry, one of the things I've noticed is that, for example, parallel lines and stuff, that was all curriculum level 5. Level 6 is now just looking at circle geometry. So we might use some parallel lines within solving a problem with circles, but we can only assess the circle geometry level stuff. Trig and Pythagoras is all still there, so that's all familiar. And in terms of our transformations, and this is something I know personally in the schools I've been at, transformation geometry often hasn't been assessed and taught because it was only a small standard, so a lot of our courses didn't contain that, but that's something now that we can bring back in. Under measurement, we've got all our area and stuff at level 5, but at level 6, this is only talking about volumes of prisms, pyramids, cones and spheres. So it's not talking about area, it's not talking about volumes of the basic shapes and things, it's not talking about nets, it's only talking about volumes of these more complex shapes. In terms of the statistics, we're now stepping up to making more of these informal inferences. That's a big one for the level 6. And the evaluations, we're doing more justifications of things. With the probability, so this is where we want to do, we need to bring in that idea about comparing the theoretical and the experimental, and in particular looking at discrete situations. So that's doing probabilities with count data particularly. So that's our curriculum. The other aspect that we are bringing in, or the ministry is bringing in, is this Mātauranga Māori focus. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the big things is that there has not been, Māori and non-Māori have not been seen as having equal status within our system. And what we will need to do is we need to rebalance those scales. We need to get it back to the bicultural foundations that this country was built upon. So these are the key changes, and this is straight from the ministry's website. There's a few of them that is particularly relevant to us as teachers. Some of it's aspirational for the ministry, and there's a few of these that are for us teachers. So here's one: equal support for Ākonga Māori and equal status for Mātauranga Māori. So this is recognising that Mātauranga Māori knowledge, understandings, ways of life, etc., they are of equal status. This is another particular one for teachers here. So we need to start integrating Māori-centred context and exemplars and assessment resources. We need to have those that are more resources that are more allow for more diverse cultural perspectives. So, for example, if I'm looking at the ideas behind assumptions and limitations of a model or a problem that I'm trying to solve, it's also recognising that there are quite a number of Mātauranga Māori reasonings that are equally as valid, and that we need to value those. Another one, and this is something for the ministry and us as teachers and our schools and organisations, is building that teacher capacity about what it is to be inclusive of Ākonga Māori. And this is, for me personally, this is a journey that's going to take me a long time, but every journey starts with a single step, and that's where I'm going, is I'm taking it one step at a time, and I'm learning from as many people as I can who have more knowledge and expertise in this area and sharing ideas. I want to just talk about the difference between what tokenism is versus what Mātauranga Māori is. And this is something that I've had a lot of conversations with our group, trying to understand this. And I'm a good person that likes examples, and so for me, and one of the examples of what tokenism is the topic that we've got with the Mike and Huia example. And in that example, it uses the name Huia, which is a Māori name. But the thing about this being tokenistic is if I was to change that name from Huia to Jack, or to Prabjeet, or to any other name, but just by changing that name, I have literally removed any Māori in this problem. And so that's tokenism, is the idea of something that's just been artificially put in there, which isn't actually deeply embedded in what Māori is. On top of that, if I think about that Mike and Huia trip, that's talking about a trip overseas, trip to England. How is that relevant to so many of our students? So, for example, if we were to allow our students a choice and say, you know what, plan a trip to somewhere that's important to you. And it could be that's within New Zealand, it could be overseas, who knows. But by now flipping this around and saying, tell us about what's important to you, where is important to you, where do you want to go and visit, and now let's plan a trip around that. We can take something that was more tokenistic and turn it into something that is much, much more deeply embedded in Mātauranga Māori. So these things can be changed, and that's one of my challenges is, what can I do about this? So Mātauranga Māori is defined as the body of knowledge originating from ancestors, including the Māori worldview, perspectives, creativity, and cultural practices. So this is the definition I've just got from the Maori dictionary online there. So I've started by looking for research, looking for ideas, papers, activities, and people such as Tony Trinick, and he's the main author of our Pangaro curriculum, Dr. Mary Berriman, Dr. Charles Royals, and there's a number of videos on the Ministry of Education website, etc. There's lots of good stuff around there that we can start accessing freely and start reading, exploring, and then having more conversations. So a couple of examples that I worked on was the tasks for 1.1, the statistical or the exploring data standard. And so one of those is this idea of whakawhanaungatanga. Apologies if I haven't said that correctly, guys. And what this is about identity. And this is something that anyone can identify with, any student, whether they are Maori, whether they are Samoan, whether they are Chinese, whether they are a refugee, whether they are a local, etc. This idea of identity, of who we are. And it's something that we know a lot of our teenagers, that's part of the process they're going through at the moment, is trying to figure out who are they, what matters to them. So that was one of the tasks I started from this initial idea of what it means to identify who are you, and I've been able to wrap a little bit more of Mātauranga Māori around that, because that idea of who you are is something that is embedded within Māori. Another example was the task of the Takaro Aringa Pukana. And this is a Māori game, but embedded within this game, there's this idea of pukana and what that actually means. And so as I was creating this task, I found a lovely little video from some What Now presenters that gave a bit of stimulus to be able to demonstrate what this is. But also I put together a short little resource sheet to help educate people. So it's not just, oh, there's this game, off you go, find me some probability stuff, but actually let's understand what's behind it. What is the meaning behind pukana? And so this to me is, I could take the name pukana out of this title, but the task itself is still embedded within it. There's a lot of Māori ideas within the task. And so this is my starting point. This is me beginning my journey, and please, I haven't got it all right, I don't know it all, but this is me starting. And some of the wonderful people at the ministry were able to help cast a te reo lens over this and help us and give us some feedback. And that's where and they said to me, just make a start. It's okay if it's not perfect, but let's move forward. So that's my challenge to every teacher that's in New Zealand. This is important. So some other ideas of things that I've picked up on. So obviously many of us know about our different patterns. And so there's some great geometry that we can pull out of there. We can pull some great algebra. But again, let's embed that. Let's explain and understand what these patterns signify. The matariki, looking at the constellation of the stars, the navigation through the stars. And I know Dr. Tony Trinick wrote an article that I read where he talked about the method of navigation was different to what we might traditionally use. And so there are some fabulous mathematics within the method that the Māori used to navigate. Another one that I've recently watched is a program on Māori TV called Moontide Fishing. And so that looks at the phases of the moon and when the fish might be in more abundance or have different patterns related to the moon tide. And so that again, that's just another example of something I can use that as my starting point and then research and find out more to make a task that is embedded within Mātauranga Māori better than what we currently have available. And of course PD, and that's something that we'll be looking. I know there's a number of sessions that NZAMT and others are putting out there, where people are coming forward to talk about it, to raise ideas and share ideas. Our group, mainly Kemi Sawyer, gave a lovely task for 1.2, the problem solving task, which is embedded within a Maori legend. And so there's some great things around, and we've just got to tap into all of those ideas as we can. So then I just want to have a little touch on internal assessments. And my challenge is that we need to move away from tests which are sit in the classroom, do this test. We need to move away in order to make things inclusive of all students, to be able to remove the need for special assessment conditions, to make it a fair playing field. What we're trying to do, the heart of internal assessment, is we're trying to get evidence from the student that they understand what it is that we are assessing. And so that's what we want to do, and we want to do it in a way that is going to give us data that is representative of their true level of understanding. So we need to make sure that it is fair and inclusive. So these are some of the principles behind it. It needs to be valid, so it has to meet the standard, be it curriculum level 6 and all those things. It has to be authentic, so we need to know that it is the student's own work. It needs to be reliable. And this is an interesting one about excellence. If I think about the mathematical tasks, particularly level 2 and 3, as we get higher, each time you write an assessment, each time I've written an assessment, I tweak what's required for excellence a little bit. And so it's not just the same. Like, students can't just look at last year's one and do it exactly the same. And that's something I'm challenging myself to figure out how I do that in statistics a bit more as well. And so there's some ideas around context and things that I can do there. So we need it to be practicable, and we need it to be creditable. And so universal design for learning is definitely one thing that I've discovered over the last little while that gives us some good guidelines. So if I think about beginning of year 11 to the end of year 11, I know that my learning for my students is going to continue through the whole year. My ideal situation personally is I would like that the assessment was woven throughout that, so that students almost didn't even know they were being assessed until after it was done. And so that's one way that reduces that pressure of sitting a test on a particular day. Everything matters, that one day matters, and you pass or fail based on that. Whereas what I want to be able to do personally is gather evidence in authentic, reliable, creditable ways that that mean that I'm assessing the student's true ability. And I've done a few talks in the past talking about, for example, how we can do that anytime, anywhere assessment. And so some of those things, let me just jump forward to wherever I've got it. Some of the things I've talked about is randomization, so that I can change the numbers in a task and I can give it to a student when they're ready for it. In a problem solving task, it might be that they're doing it over a period of time, that they've got a task that they do, and I'm going to manage them in the class to make sure that it is only their work, nobody else has done it for them, but it's done in a way that isn't that same style as we used to in the past. Okay, so let me jump back to where I just skipped ahead to. So in terms of fair and inclusive, we've got all those lovely things about making sure it's inclusive of students who have disabilities, students who have learning needs. It's fair for all of our students, and particularly our high priority learners, but it's equitable for everybody. So, for example, text to speech, speech to text, get it the right way around, or being able to do video recordings or having conversations that are recorded, so audio recordings, and there's lots of different ways that we can do this. So the idea is giving people choice, giving ākonga choice. So here are some of the guidelines that the ministry have said would for level 1, and this is across all subjects, to try and make all subjects consistent and what's required for level 1. So for example, a digital presentation where Akonga have 6 to 8 slides. A written report, maximum of 800 words. A video recording, maximum of 5 minutes. A poster, up to 800 words. So these are some guidelines. So giving students the choice of how they present their information is one way that we can include that choice and open it up and make it more fair and equitable. Authenticity is an absolute key feature, and I know as teachers I've had a lot of conversations over time. How do I make sure that every single piece of work that I get from a student is their work, not the tutor, not an older sister or brother? That how do I make sure of that? And so that's something that we need to do and have conversations about, because it absolutely can be done, and quite a number of people have been doing that for a few years now. And so my challenge is, let's see how far we can go with this. Thanks for watching. I hope there's been some useful information, and I'll have another couple of videos looking at the numeracy unit standards and the 1.1 exploring data and the 1.3 maths and stats literacy. I'll go through a little bit more and share some information about that as well. Hope this helps, guys.